Welcome to the Big Book Roundtable and the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all kinds. RICO 12 is a resource for anyone out there seeking the solution to any addiction, affliction, trouble, struggle in their lives. And one of the things that we've done here with this RICO 12 Roundtable is we're going basically from the front cover through page 164 of the Big Book and doing a quick dive through with history, with experience, strength, and hope, and talking things about this. And I'm sitting here with David G. and Nikki M. The three of us are striving to live in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. And I'm grateful to have them here as panelists with me. Let's real quick get them to introduce themselves. David, if you wouldn't mind taking just a second, introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin. My name is David G. I'm an alcoholic and addict of many sorts from Oklahoma. Grateful to have been in the rooms for about 3 decades now, and very, very grateful to be here with you and our sister, Nikki. You're a rock star.
Thank you, David. Now, Nikki, rock star, come in here and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki M., and I'm a grateful, loving child of God. And according to my book, I'm a member of this fellowship, and I have a desire to stop doing anything that doesn't align with God's will. And I really need to be here today because you know what they say, when all other measures fail, work with another addict will save the day. So grateful.
Love it. And grateful to have both of you here. I was just doing some quick addition in my mind, and between the three of us, and this isn't to toot our horns or anything, but we got over 50 years in the rooms of recovery. And, you know, living it one day at a time, it's kind of a cool thing to sit around it with people with so much experience and strength and hope. All right, today we're going to continue our reading in the Big Book. Everybody get ready to jump into this. We're in the Big Book, the 4th edition, starting on page 12, and we'll read several paragraphs today. We'll do some commenting on it. Each of us will share some experience, strength, and hope and takeaway from it. And so get ready to mark this up and apply what you learn in your own recovery and in working with others. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start reading here. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such concepts as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. And this is a powerful experience that Bill is relating here. And I want to jump into this a little bit and have each of you share a little bit of your experience, strength, and hope and some of your insights into this. David, why don't you jump in and tell us a little bit about some of the not takeaways, but your insights there and maybe some history that you know about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, you're right. This is such a powerful part of the book. This is the page where Bill has the spiritual experience. Now, everybody says that it happened when he went to Towns Hospital and he saw a flash of light and he was never the same. And that's all true. But what we've read here shows us that he had this experience while sitting at the kitchen table. And this is the same experience that I had in 1994. And then I had it again in 2019 and several of them along the way. But these big blowout experiences like he's talking about. So he says, despite the living example of my friend, which you read, small f, so we're talking about Abby Thatcher here, there remained to me the vestiges of my old prejudice. That's what happened to me. When the man came to me with the solution, he began to talk about the religious idea and the spiritual experience. There's always the vestiges of my old prejudice. He said the word God still aroused a certain antipathy. We're going to see on page 47 of this book, there is an exercise that's outlined as a spiritual terms exercise. The word God, the word spirit, the word source, the word creator, that's just it. It's a term. And so Bill he's going through this now. But here's the key. When the thought, and this is what we're really going to start dealing with, these thoughts, emotions, ideas, concepts, attitudes, beliefs, prejudice. Bill says when the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, see, he's not convinced at this point. There might be. And that's kind of how I was. He said this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the key word here, idea. So thoughts, ideas, I can go for such conceptions. There it is, conceptions. Creative, intelligent, universal mind, spirit of nature. These are all conceptions that we look at when we come in here. But I resist the thought of the czar of the heaven, however loving his sway may be. This is the reason he wrote the chapter more about alcoholism, because he knew we wouldn't like the solution as outlined on page 25 and 27 of this book any more than he did. This is why. He said, I've since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. And this one statement changed. I mean, this has been the saving grace for myself and alcoholics and addicts throughout history. Why don't you choose your own conception? No one ever said that to me. Religion always said this is the way you must believe. Spirituality says it doesn't matter. The question is, do you believe? And so I love how he begins to describe this. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain whose shadow I'd lived and shivered many years, talking about God. He said, I'm in the sunlight at last. He begins to talk about it's only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater. Nothing more is required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point upon a foundation of complete willingness. That's step one. I might build what I saw in my friend Ebby. Would I have it? Of course I would. So the foundation of the structure is willingness. We see that all throughout the book. But here's where he had his second step experience. Now we've seen in page 8 where he had a first step experience, but he drank again because he didn't have a solution. He said, thus I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. And I think that's the problem. I come in here, I want to be sober. I want the old lady to get off of my tail for all the things that I've been doing. I want work to calm down. I want things to go well. But these are the things I want. See, I wasn't really concerned a whole lot about God. I just wanted circumstances. But here's where he experienced his second step. He said, at long last, I saw, I felt, and I believed. And look how he describes his spiritual experience at the table. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. That's an awakening. And that's exactly what happened to me in 1995. I came in 1994 and was just batshit crazy. I mean, crazy in these rooms. I mean, fighting with people after meetings, talking out my tail to anybody and everybody. It just didn't matter. I had no filter. And I can remember going through this process of the book with a man. And by the time we got to the third step and began to write inventory and look into the rest of the steps, the same thing that happened to Bill right there happened to me. I saw, I felt, I believed. This pride and prejudice began to fall from my eyes. I was able to see things differently. I wasn't as angry anymore. I wasn't as selfish anymore. I wasn't as dishonest as I had been. And that started my journey into the spiritual realm of recovery for the next 28, 29 years. It's been a beautiful experience. So we're going to see coming soon how he takes what we know today to be the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he recovers from a hopeless state of mind at the hospital. This is a powerful, powerful story, and one that I just love studying. So thank you for allowing me to be here, Justin. It's good to be here with you guys.
Yeah, and thank you, David, for sharing a bit of that history and some of those further insights. I've got some questions for you on that I'll get to here in a minute. But Nikki, tell us a little bit about what you get from the reading that we've gone through today.
Well, I'm just so excited. As I said, I'm grateful to be here. And I don't know, Justin, about you, but David keeps talking about this spiritual exercise on page 47. And we're only on page 12, so I have a lot to look forward to. Anyway, back to the book here. God, the word God, my line out says, I was mad at God. See, God did all of this to me. And I didn't want to hear the word God. If you saw my first set of steps through the book, through my big book, where you can find the word God, I crossed it out and I put power. Because my sponsor said, Nikki, no one's looking for God. We're looking for power. And that I could wrap my head around that. But I'm not looking for God because God did this to me. And so, little fun fact, I have a big tattoo on my neck and it says God. Now, I got that during COVID when I thought all my rights and I was going away, never to be returned again. If I could go back, would I have that big tattoo? I'm not sure, but I love God. That's just, and it's just a word now for me. And, I love what it says here when he goes down to, why don't you choose your own conception of God? When I first came in here and I was asked to do that, of course, I'm a sex and love addict. I chose Thor. Okay. Like my mind can go crazy. I wanted this big guy with a hammer to come and save Nikki. And eventually I've stayed here long enough, friends. If you're listening, I've been here in the rooms 11 years, God willing, I'll make it to 12 on February 14th. I'm a real love addict. And my God has no face. My God has no name, no nothing. It's a feeling. And of course, that statement hit me hard. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? And when I had a real drop to my knees moment, see, I've had the educational kind of awakening, but I did have this statement hit me hard. And it wasn't in the big book. It's when the big book tells me on page 87, I think, there are many helpful books. And I got a book during COVID when we all were forced onto Zoom. And I found this group called How to Listen to God by Wally P. And that is when year 8, I'll never forget it, Justin, I dropped to my knees and the statement that nothing is mine, I can't quote it verbatim out of that book, but it basically says the material possessions of this world aren't yours. And I worship money. Remember on page 8, we said, what is your master? Because alcohol was Bill's master. Well, money and men were mine. And that hit me hard. And that day, my money obsession was removed. And so, where it says down here, growth could start from that point. I have a friend. She doesn't know I'm her friend. Her name is Joyce Meyer. And she has a huge congregation and she preaches to millions, but she's my friend. And she talks in her story when she shares her experience, strength, and hope, that she was in her living room with a church group in short shorts, smoking cigarettes, and was wondering why God wasn't putting her on the pulpit in front of everybody. And she reminds me constantly, it takes time. And I'm reminded that growth can start from this point, Nikki, and that it takes time. And I just have to be willing. And so I take my sponsees a lot to this sentence, and I'll end here, where it says, thus was I, and it says, Nikki, convinced. Convinced means 100% without a doubt that God, and my sponsees don't like the word God, and neither did I. So what do I change that with? The spiritual principles. Thus am I convinced that humility is concerned with Nikki when I want humility enough. Thus am I convinced that being responsible is concerned with me when I want to be responsible enough. And that's a key word. I heard it from my French friend. We're bilingual in Canada, and he said it in this really great French Quebecois accent, enough. And I thought, yeah, I want God enough more than I want anything. And that sentence alone rocks me to my core every time I read page 12. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nikki. Good stuff, guys, for in that takeaway. I've got a question for each of you here. David, talk a little bit more about the thoughts, ideas, and conceptions. You said this, all the time. These are keywords here, and how thoughts, ideas, conceptions need to be addressed by the individual who's working recovery.
That's a great question, Justin. Thank you. In the very beginning of our book, on the title page, it says here are thousands of men and women who have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, but it says alcoholism. And so that ism, a lot of people says that stands for I sponsor me, I, self, and me. But what I've learned through this book and through my experience is that's what the self is made up of. It's made up of thoughts. It's made up of conceptions. We're going to see a lot of this as we move through the rest of the book. He thought that everything was okay as long as he mixed whiskey with milk. Why the hell would you think that? Well, I come to learn that it's not really me doing that thinking. I'm taking actions based on those thoughts, but I'm not the one that's bringing those thoughts to me. So therefore, I'm accountable, but I'm not really responsible for that thought system. Now, once I recover, I go through the steps, then I'm most definitely responsible to keep an eye on those things and stuff like that. But you would ask, how does the individual really keep an eye on that? And I've said this week after week, page 84 of our book is the most beautiful outline of that, because by now we're able to watch. We're able to identify these things. We know now that this isn't who we are. This is who we become based on a narrative that lives in our mind. It comes and talks to us. And if we're not aware of what it is, we begin to act on it. And the next thing you know, we're in all kinds of trouble with sex and love and drugs and alcohol and money and all these things that's been mentioned here today. So this self, that's what it's made up of. I killed a man when I was 16 years old with a stick of wood. And the man had abused me for years and years as a kid. And that day, the thought came to my mind, no man will ever put his hands on me again without my permission. And that thought grew and grew and grew. And I hurt a hell of a lot of people, injured a whole lot of people. My mother came out that day. She was like, I'm going to call the police. And the thought came, you never called the police on him all the years he's been doing this to me. Maybe I killed the wrong one. It should have been you. And that thought grew and grew and grew and grew. But what happened in my mind, I said, I will never trust another woman as long as I live. And so I began to hurt them in ways that I knew that would hurt them with sex and lust. So these thoughts and ideas and concepts and beliefs and prejudice, they begin to grow in us through trauma and other things that happen in our life. I don't realize that this is not who I am. This is who I've become based on this thought system. By the time we get to step 11 through this process of the book, it says, hey, man, there's new thinking here now. It begins to talk about what used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind now. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we've tried this for a while. This new thinking begins to happen. So really, for me, God's spirit, any of that kind of stuff, it comes back to one thing. I'm living by either a false thought system or a recovered. And if I'm living by a recovered one, no matter what you do to me, you can't hurt me. But if I'm living in the lower part of thoughts, the self, the conceptions, the beliefs, the attitudes, I will kill somebody in that state of mind. So it's very important that I go through this process and I learn about those things that are so toxic to me. So anyway, grateful to be here. Thanks again, Justin, for your service. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, David, for illuminating that and for sharing these experiences of yours. That's powerful to be able to hear that and see where these principles can take us in our lives and where they can bring us out of. Beautiful, beautiful experience shared there. Thanks, David. Nikki, question for you. Talk about a little bit about having enough. I'm trying to do a French accent. I can't do it. So I'm not even going to try. Enough willingness, open-mindedness to really make that beginning that is needed in this area of finding a power greater than self.
Well, thank you, Justin, for that question. And I also want to tell everyone who's listening, when I came on this podcast, I didn't know David very well. And, when you get a sponsee at first, we spend a lot of time talking and I say, I don't want to talk to you. We'll get to know each other as we go along. And so I just want to thank you, David, because I'm getting to know more about you and sharing your intimate experiences with us. That's what happens. We grow together. We don't have to just dump everything the first day we meet. We're learning each other as we grow. And so that will lead me into this answer, which is, enough. Number one, I have to want program and staying here more than I want anything. See, when I say to my boyfriend, I love you, but I love God more, he says, I know, and I love God more than I love you. And with my son, I'll share some experience, strength, and hope. Baby daddy number 2 called me the other day. He was looking for something, and he accidentally found something in my son's gym bag, and he's 19. And he called me, and I just told him, because I have a very strong Al-Anon program, I said, he's 19, kick him out of your house. That's all I just suggested. Daddy doesn't want to follow, that's fine. And he says, Nikki, you don't care. And I said, I want God more than I want to co-sign my son's bullshit. So I'm in a program. This is what I know. You called me. This is the answer I know. If you don't like it, I can't support you. This is very simple. See, what does it mean to want God, the willingness enough? It means that you come in here and you've done a thorough step 1. And I'm going to repeat this to the people in the back, you are beyond human aid. Nothing on this planet can help you. So I have to want this power, these spiritual principles, and I'll just start with the biggest principle of all. I have to want love, agape love, unconditional love, and my favorite, radical love above everything else, above my need to be right. This is not for the faint at heart. And that's what I'm realizing as I stick around in these rooms. I have to want this program. I have to want the spiritual principles. I have to want my own conception of God more than I want my children, more than I want money, more than I want you to like me. This can be very lonely, and I'll end here. Page 63 says, it's better to meet God alone than with those who do not understand. So I'm just so grateful, because I know Justin knows what enough is. I certainly know that David G knows what enough is. And I'm learning what this means. This means that God is everything or God is nothing. And I love to be in the book. It reminds me of what I need, especially in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. All right, we're going to jump into takeaways here, and I'm going to lead us off with the takeaways here, because I didn't share a little bit of one of the things I got out of this reading. And one of the things I love about this roundtable is that the 3 of us come from very different backgrounds, and we're coming together in the same solution. David and Nikki both talked about how they hated the concept of God. They hated God when they came in. I had a different relationship. It was a love-hate relationship, but I was one of those guys that carried my Bible everywhere and said, this is how it is. This is how it is. And then I had, this phrase right here that we read, that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. The shadow of the icy mountain of knowing religion is the solution is every bit as dark and cold as the shadow of saying there is no God. If I'm so prejudiced that I can't see that there's other things around there, I'm in that icy shadow there. And I love the melting that's happening, the flood of water that's coming down, and the cleansing and the opening of my eyes and my heart is just amazing. All right. So that's my takeaway. That's my insight into our reading today. David, what's your takeaway from what we've discussed today?
Well, choosing your own conception of God is the most powerful thing that ever happened to me. When I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and like most people, hell, I'm afraid of God. Everything that I've been taught about God up to this point has been taught to me by wounded people, only I don't know that they're wounded. And so the things that they are teaching me are the things that they have learned from somebody who was wounded as well. And we're really not having any experience here. So when I come here, I have a lifetime of that stuff in my pocket. And someone says, choose your own conception of God. That's not possible for me to do that, man. He said, yes, it is. And I want you to do that. And I said, all right, so hell, sin, and the devil are gone right now. And he said, so be it. And that's the way it has been ever since. The book says we created our own misery. God didn't do this. And my experience shows that that's absolutely the truth. So my takeaway from this reading today, don't ever not choose your own conception of God. My ego will fight against it. It doesn't want me to change my belief because it threatens the ego's freedom. It no longer has freedom when I begin to grow and change through this process. By choosing my own conception, however limited that may be, I get to have a new experience with this creator. And I found that it is love. It's love. I love my son. I have two sons. One drowned when I was 9 months sober. He drowned. He was 6 years old. The other one is 36 now. And God forbid, that he would have went on the playground as a kid and shot 10 kids. There's no way that I would not have loved him. And there is no way that if I had the power to send him to hell that I would ever do that. So as a wounded human being, if I wouldn't do that to my son, why in the hell would a loving God do that to me? And all of a sudden, these things begin to open up and make a lot of sense. Thank God we get to choose our own conception of God. I don't have to go by what I was taught. It saved my life. So thank you, Justin. Glad to be here.
Thank you, David, for sharing that. Nikki, what's a takeaway from our discussion today for you?
Well, besides the fact that I'm on the verge of tears with all the things that's going on in my life and a little bit of sprinkle of menopause, I'm just going a new world. I live a new dream world. Hey, if anybody's out there listening and they say women stick with women and men stick with men, I'm going to say that's lies. I didn't see that in my book because I'm looking at two men who are sharpening me every time we meet at this round table. I live a new world. Why? Because I'll piggyback off what David said. I have the most powerful creator in the universe who is crazy about me, like insanely crazy, in love, mad love for me. So my takeaway today is that I live a new world, fell from my eyes. I'm a blind woman and I can see again. Completely reborn. And, I love from another book, and I've been sitting on this line, the birds in the trees don't worry. Why do you, Nikki? So I have nothing to worry about. Like, this is a new world where everything I can imagine is possible with this power greater than myself. I'm really high on God dope and a little menopause. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Guys, just such a powerful conversation today. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And everybody out there, if your conception of God is not this completely all-powerful, all-loving, all-embracing God, I invite you to find your own conception of God that is that. Because, man, it works. God works. And so does this program. Work it. You are worth it.